Hey everyone, today's episode is a really exciting one. We have Anant Shrivastava. He's a seasoned researcher, trainer, and founder of Cyfinoid Research, a company that focuses on security research and trainings in the space of Android, cloud, and supply chain. In our conversation, we dive deep into what really matters in cybersecurity. It's not just certifications. Anant shares honest take on how open source has changed, what DevSecOps and CI/CD pipelines really look like in real life, and why your ability to solve problems is more important than just ticking boxes. We even talk about AI, conference paper submissions, and how security landscape is evolving. Whether you are just getting started in tech or looking to sharpen your approach, this episode is full of clear advice and hard-earned wisdom that will leave you thinking differently. This is Abhishek, and you are listening to the Abhisek Cast.
Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Hi, Abhishek. Thanks for inviting in.
So to begin with, so you started as an Linux, instructor on a Linux academy, and then you were into security analyst, and you were into consultation part, and been worked as a director, and now as a researcher and a founder. So how has your journey been? So can you walk us through on that?
All right. Security was never the original intention for me. I started out using Linux somewhere around 2000, year 2000. And the whole reason I started using Linux was because I got this PC Quest magazine where they had PC Quest Linux. That used to be a custom version of Red Hat Linux at that point. And I took that CD to my school, like, okay, what is this? What do I do with that? And the instructor at my school was like, hey, Anant, I don't know what this is. But what I do know is people who know what this is are people who are very capable people. So that was kind of the initial idea. Then for about a year or so, I did nothing around that. And then one fine day, casually, I found that CD again. And I had the whole booklet with me, the PC Quest magazine. They had a detailed step-by-step instructions on how to install Linux and then use it. And this was, like I said, 2000 time frame. Mostly command line stuff, very minimal GUI stuff was there. So that's kind of how I started with Linux. Then internet came in my life. I got involved with Linux user groups. So at one point I was part of, I think, about 20, 35 different Linux user groups across India. So Linux user groups back in the early 2000s was a very big rage. There were lots of Linux user groups and everyone was interacting with each other. People were there to answer questions. And it was like a world that got open to me. I could ask any damn thing and there would be someone interested in answering it. That's kind of how we started with the whole world of Linux. Then server administration became like interesting area for me. I started working towards it. Did my preps for Red Hat certified engineer course, RHC. Somewhere in the line, a friend of mine started a institute called Linux Academy, and they wanted to have an instructor there. And I thought, okay, why not give it a shot? The first batch that I took was of people who were 15, 20 years into Unix environments. So I was mostly the most inexperienced person teaching the most experienced people. That was the time which basically told me, okay, I need to upskill myself if I want to be a teacher or if I want to teach people. So that's where the whole cycle went on and on. 2008, I graduated, joined a company as officially it was a software engineer position. I eventually ended up doing the server admin backend work for the project where I was working. And I think around 2010 is when I had to make a decision call. I wanted to leave the company. Where do I go from here? So server admin effectively meant at that time night shifts and mostly 11 hours, 12 hours kind of things. So I was like, okay, if I have to spend that much time, let's see what other options are. And the logical option that came out was I was anyways doing securing from a server admin point of view. So why not look at security in general? So I looked up, found one course at that time, which was like the course suggested by everyone, which was Certified Ethical Hacker, or what we call EC Council CEH. It did a fantastic job for me. That course, in a very short span of time, gave me every single keyword that existed in InfoSec space at that time. Nothing below the surface, but at the surface, it gave me everything. Every single keyword was given to me. So I took that, started working in the InfoSec space, started as a log analyst with Guardium servers. Then we did a lot of automation at that time. Then moved to Infosys, then PA consulting, did a bit of freelancing, joined Not So Secure as the first person, was the director there, ended up leading a team of about 40 people there. Then I started my own company. So security then on has been offensive, defensive, combination, consulting, product development, bunch of different things around that.
That's great. That's great to hear. So, since you spoke about CH, right? So, right now, if we do a comparison with the existing certificates with comparing to other, for example, TCM security or anything. So, CH is going to be an theoretical MCQ based examination, while others probably like EJPT or PNPT, or they are going to be like a practical examination where you have to go and hack stuff. So, how do you see the difference between these two things, and which one do you prefer on going right now if you had to choose one?
If it is possible, don't go for any certification. That's what I suggest generally. And there's a very specific reason behind it. Certifications are effectively a point in time snapshot of what is it that is going on in your brain between that time frame. So I'll take two different examples. You might be appearing for CEH, and while appearing, you forgot the definition of masquerading, and that ended up resulting in a deduction of 1 marks. That does not reflect your real life situation. In real life, you'd just go in and quickly search and you'd be like, I know the word. It was just confusion in the definition. I'm all good. Take, for example, OSCP, GPT, whatever hands-on certifications, any of those hands-on certifications you talk about. In that particular time frame, if you forgot that one specific switch that you needed and your Google search and nowadays the chat GPT search is not giving you the right answer, you got stuck somewhere. And that resulted in you not getting a certain number that you were expecting, does not necessarily means that you'd be stuck in that same situation in real life. The claim that we mimic the real life can never be true. They can give you a feel of what the real life could be, but that real life is what the instructor faced sometimes. So the challenges are generally created. I've created a number of challenges. The challenges are generally what I've read, what I've faced. I will create challenges based on that to give people an idea that, hey, something like this can happen. Now, these are not a run-of-the-mill work. These are exceptional edge cases that you would face in a company. Like, see, why do people do certifications? They want to get employed. When you get employed, what is your daily life looking like? And you're a pen tester now, you would see a stark difference between what was sold to you as a life of a pen tester versus what it is right now. The Excels, the PowerPoints, and the Word docs, which we never focus on, how important they become to rely and communicate what we are doing is another angle. The whole communication with your peers, with your superiors, with your clients, with manager, with different people in the organization, that matters. And at times it matters far more than how quickly you can become an enterprise admin in a complicated environment. So certifications, if there is no specific need, don't go for a certification. They're not going to help you massively. Where they are going to help you is if there's a specific barrier to entry. The only reason I did CH was because there was a barrier to entry. Any place where I would go, they would ask, if you have CH, we would let you in. Now, I have interviewed, since then I've interviewed countless people. Whenever I see a certification, my hopes are increased already. So if you come in with a CH certificate, I know you know theory. I would ask practical questions to judge whether you know the practical stuff or not. If you come in with OSCP, my assumption is you've compromised networks. You know in and out of environments, you know tricks, and I'm going to grill you on those. So by having higher grade certificates in your resume, when you are, say, an entry level person or with a 1 year or 2 year experience, you are painting a target on your head. Rather, have a smaller certificate, but have the skill which you can explain during which you can basically demonstrate during the interview, which raises your level. So general recommendation for everyone that I tell is undercommit, overperform. So if you are able to do 100, commit I can do 70, and then do 100 or 110. You have overperformed.
That's a nice hack.
So that's what I generally suggest. In terms of certifications, I generally don't have any specific recommendation. Every certificate is trying to gauge you on whatever that certificate creator thought is the best thing.
And also, going into some of the open source tools part. So I was able to find out a couple of them through your LinkedIn profile, and one of them is that Android Tamer, which is an VM with the
Yep.
tools that is useful for Android penetration testing, and also the Code Vigilant part, which is an open source security for the open source tools. So what is your vision about open source, like committing towards, contributing towards open source community, the communities like FOSS communities, which is contributing like open source tools. So what is your take on that, and what makes you contribute for those environments?
It used to be a lot simpler in earlier days. Now it's a bit convoluted. So I keep writing all these abstract thoughts in my blogs. One of them is we all have learned to game the system. So effectively, what FOSS has now become is a mechanism to game the system. Earlier, initial days, we were doing FOSS contributions because I built something. I wanted to share it with my peers. I wanted to showcase. It was a proud moment for me. Like, I built something I want to show to others. There was no obligation attached to it. There was no sort of expectation attached to it. There was no hidden motive that I want to create a following or I want to do some massive stuff. It was as simple as that. I wrote something. Maybe someone else could get benefit out of it. Otherwise, even if that does not happen, it does not matter. I wrote something, I wanted to show it to the world. If the world gets something out of it, that's up to the world. I am just showcasing what I can or I have done. So that's how FOSS basically started. That's how everyone started looking at things. There was another angle which was around the licensing aspect and the capability that if I make some change, if I create a software, someone else makes a change, they should be able to, or they're forced to put that out in open so that others can also learn that, hey, these are the enhancements that can be done. Now what has happened is people realized that people were getting jobs because they were doing open source work. So now it became a inverted logic where I will do open source to get a job. And when you're doing something to reach a certain other destination, you will do this thing till you reach that destination. It's like how people on LinkedIn used to be that if someone is active on LinkedIn means they're looking for a job. As soon as they found a job, they would stop using LinkedIn. And then after 2-3 years, they're again active on LinkedIn, means they're looking for a job. They'll get a job and then move on. So in a similar manner, I have seen people leveraging open source. It's not bad, but it's not good also. If people are putting code out, it's fine. But what you also then see is perverted utilization of these things. So if what I know, and this comes back to our certification question, if the interviewer is asking for a certification, do the certification. In same logic, if the interviewer is saying, I want open source contributions, people do open source contribution. Now, what is it that you're doing as part of open source contribution? Now, I have a contribution to Metasploit, which is a spelling check fix. In one particular word, 2 letters were flipped. I changed that. Now, should I go bragging that I have a contribution in Metasploit framework? I have
Technically, you
another,
shouldn't, but
but I can. It shows that I've contributed to Metasploit. Someone can go and look, but it shows that way. So incentives game the system. If you're doing open source work, do it because you want to do it. Otherwise, write code. And effectively, the reason why people right now suggest that you should put things out, you should put your code out, you should put whatever you're working on in open source. One, we don't know when our systems would crash and the data would be gone. So if it is in some other place, it's safe. So it's like a backup that you have. Two, if I look at your code and I'm a well-wisher of yours, I find something wrong, I might end up informing you, or I might end up giving you a pull request. So collectively, everyone is going to get better. That's the core motive behind it. If you're doing open source to get a job, it's fine. You can do that, but then don't expect anything more from it. And like, people create tools, people brag about those tools. You'd find 200 posts over every social media about this is the new tool that I've built. And after 2 months, they're not even bothered looking at it. Why make a big fuzz about it rather than just keep making whatever you're doing?
True. That's true. That's an complete good perspective to understand this part. It's like an transition of mindset where people, what you mentioned was like people were just putting out what they have done, but right now what we are seeing like an transaction thing. So I have given something, so give me back something.
Yep.
So it's going in that way. So is this like maybe this is just an perspective from my side. So has this transition has become in the recent days, like last couple of years, where there is an vast like an use of internet where like after Geo came in giving out a lot of internet for free and people started using it, and right now it's no social media is uh, like an dopamine hit for a lot of people, the reels, the shorts and stuff. So do you think these are the couple of reasons why this transition of the mindset has happened?
I mean, social media is a recent thing. When I say recent, I remember Orkut, I remember MySpace, which were like the original, or rather, even before that, there have been social media angles from a very long time, different ways and forms. What has changed is the rapid access to internet, the sort of way to put things out. Like, everyone assumes that if you follow someone on Instagram, you know what is happening in their day of the life. That does not means that you actually know what happened in their day. It could be a scheduled set of posts that they have to just showcase that everything is fine in their world. And they may actually be going through depression, going through whatever. So that's all a different angle of discussion altogether. But coming down to the initial question of what has caused this transition and the role of social media around it. One, I don't think so. This is just social media. There have been people who have been abusing or have been trying to abuse the system all along. Somewhere down the line, someone is actually going to come up and say, hey, isn't that what hackers are supposed to do? Gaming the system is one of the qualities of being called a hacker. And to a certain extent, yes, when you look at the classic definition, or the definition that I generally abide by with the term hacker, someone who can make the system do things that the system is not supposed to do. It does not matter if it is good, it is bad, because that's not what the person is thinking. The person is actually trying to make the system do something else than what is specified set of outcomes that the system should give. So anyone who's gaming the system is actually doing a bit of hackerish work somewhere. But then what is it that you're achieving with that? And is it going to help you overall? So in terms of social media, the dopamine hit definitely comes into picture. People nowadays have less attention span. They want, and effectively what has happened is you are following 200 people or 2000 people. Even if everyone is facing depression 360 days of their life, 5 days they're happy. That 5 days into 200 is the happy pictures that you see. So while you are happy 5 days, you see 200 into 5 happy moments. So you're always in that constant state of inferiority complex, constant state of FOMO, that, hey, I am inadequate. And that's where at some point people end up realizing on their own, because see, there is a path where you can say that people learn from other people's mistake. but I'm kind of firmly in the camp that you can learn from your mistakes. You can see other people making mistakes, but you end up doing something similar and then you make the learning solidified. You can say that I've learned, but you only learn when you actually commit the mistake yourself. And that's where things are. People end up committing mistakes. What is needed more is realizing that everyone is going through struggle. No one is better than where you are. So no matter how happy the other person is looking, there might be some things going on in their life. If you are in good terms with that person, can they rely on you when something goes wrong? And can collectively people help each other move forward? Once you reach that point, the dopamine hit of social media starts reducing down. When you have a collective, when you have a set of friends who are encouraging each other. So I have a couple of WhatsApp groups. There's a WhatsApp group which is of my childhood friends. And that group is of people that attended school with me. There's a group of people who attended college with me. There's a group of people who were in the first company with me. And then there are other groups. The important criteria that I've kept in mind is I keep a circle of people who are encouraging me or who are supporting me. When I say encouraging, it does not mean that a person should not tell me what is wrong. I value a person who would call me up and say, Anant, you're doing something wrong here. That's a valuable person to have in life. What I don't like to have in life is someone who is least bothered about myself, but more bothered about putting themselves out. I would much rather have a group of friends who are collectively helping each other out, helping each other through bad situations, through good situations. Once you have that kind of a group available with you, you don't seek external validation. That's where the whole dopamine hit, social media, influences, all of these die down. And then you can focus on your core capabilities. And that's where the early days of schools and colleges, this is where you actually form those golden relationships that you can carry throughout your life.
So this is a very great, valuable insight that people can get. So let's just move forward into some of the technical things that I plan to talk upon.
Yep.
So to like the people who are new to the concept, can you please walk us through on the concepts of CI/CD pipeline on terms of cybersecurity, and why is the necessity of to focus on these kind of places and how it is valuable in their point of view, and why to pick up different type of cybersecurity topics rather than relying on just on application or network security, which everyone is trying to focus on.
All right. So you asked me about Tamer also, you asked me about Code Vigilant also. I'll mix those in this answer.
Sure.
See, one thing is when you look at, and especially at the college level, when we talk about people at the college level, the general notion is that there are programmers who write code, and then there are, say, server admins who deploy these codes somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere. And then there are maybe QA people, like those inferior set of people who don't program, but they do testing and that sort of things. That's kind of how most colleges educate people. The real world is not like that. The real world right now has moved to a phase. So in old days, the whole development life cycle used to be a waterfall model. In waterfall model or in a staged released model, the way it used to work was I would go to a client, I would take requirements from them, and then I'll work on those requirements. I will then reach a point where I have something I can show to the client. I will show to the client, take their feedback, create the final product, deliver the product, and that's end of the story. Now we live in the world of internet. Everyone wants things online, everyone wants things faster, quicker. And what everyone has also realized is because people want too many things, the ability to express themselves has also gone down. If I ask a client to express what exactly they want, they may not be able to do it in one shot. So now we've reached to a slightly different approach towards software development. We are now in the world of agile development logics. Now, in the agile world, the way things work is the initial idea of requirements is taken from the client. Some work is done, and very quickly, say within a week or within a month's time, you go back to the client, take the feedback again, show them something which is working, and then come back, implement those changes, go back to the client. These are the changes we have done. Does this looks good? Is there a change? And that becomes a continuous feedback loop. Now, this was happening for consulting kind of industries where a client would walk in and ask for a product to be developed. Now, what we also have is industry, where earlier when we say industry, we used to say manufacturing plants or physical heavy machinery industries. Now the industry is also software industry. So now there are organizations where the actual work is all on a web application or a mobile application. Effectively, that means your client, your development team is both sitting in the same floor. So you have a set of developers who are working, and there's a set of people who are basically putting things out in market. So now they want much more faster feedback cycles. So if I compare with some of the modern firms, let's say Shopify, let's say Flipkart, let's say Amazons of the world, when you refresh their page, pick any page on the website, when you refresh that page multiple times throughout the day, you might end up seeing different versions of that page. Because the deployment, what used to be once in a 6 month to then what used to be once in a week, has now reached 40 times a day kind of a speed. Now, when you have that kind of speed, the standard process was there would be development work, then there will be QA involved, then security team would be involved, and then the production would get the deployment. Startups merged dev and ops people into one group, called them DevOps group. Ideally, the assumption was that security and QA is part of this whole process. And one set of automation would deal with all of it. So we started having tooling where the developers realized that they can't keep a tab on all things hardware. So they wanted to automate it. So they started looking at automation and how do you automate the deployment piece of equation. That's where Terraforms to Vagrants to all of these automation tools came up into picture. What that did was that basically created infrastructure as code. So now instead of having a admin who would then provision something somewhere by manually clicking some buttons, you now have a code sitting around where you change some variables, and from 2 GB system you can now have 6 GB system because you changed a 2 to 6 and then you ran a script and it deployed everything. So the deployment started happening. Now you have all these smaller pieces of automation. You have a need where the companies are now asking you to deploy things faster and faster. So how do you end up doing it? That is where continuous integration and continuous deployment logics came into picture, which is what we call as CI and CD. Effectively, and there are n number of toolings around this. There's Jenkins, there is GitHub Actions, there is Azure has their own version, all clouds have their own versions of CIs. There are n number of other CIs. Jenkins used to be the old self-deployable CI environment at one point. Now, till Jenkins was in picture, there used to be a segregation that there is a code repository and there's a software which is sitting, which actually checks the code repository. If there's any change there, it'll try and pull that change here, do a compilation, perform certain set of steps, and then give you the output. Now with GitHub Action and similar sort of CI systems in picture, we've kind of blurred that line. Now we assume that the code repository itself contains the CI elements and everything gets done then and there. We don't kind of see them as two distinct systems. But GitHub Actions is its own distinct system and GitHub is its own distinct things. You can have both of them together. You can have one of them. You can have any one piece of them. So now what we have reached is the developer writes the code. The developer writes the specifications of what's the underlying operating system, what's the underlying system configuration that needs to be, and they hand it over to GitHub kind of environment, where there is a automation like GitHub Action sitting, which checks its file, has a set of steps, it performs those steps. Now, ideally, there should be test cases inside it also. So when you build something, you've deployed it, the test cases run and check whether the deployment is successful or not in a test environment created within the GitHub Action environment. If the tests are successful, then move forward. Now, when you say test, something that people find controversial when I say, but security testing is part of QA, quality assurance or testing. Security testing is actually a subset of that testing domain. The same domain which is considered inferior in school or in college days, it's that same domain. Security testing is part of that same domain. Now, when you're doing security testing, ideally there should be most of it done automatically within your CI's pipeline. So that's where you should be doing your source code review. You should be doing your third-party library checks. You should be doing a bit of automation around test cases. So there are specific test cases that you know that a security issue has crept in earlier in a certain feature. There should be test cases written which could check for those. So that becomes the CI/CD pipeline. Now, people call it DevSecOps, people call it DevSec AI Ops, and then instead of sec, you can have like n number of keywords fit in between dev and ops. But effectively, it's DevOps, where the whole process of a developer and operations have merged together and they are the single entity now. Does that gives you the answer?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
So
So, sorry, there were
please
two
go on. Yeah.
other things that you also mentioned about Code Vigilant and Tamer. Tamer originated because in 2010-11 timeframe, lots of development was happening in Android world, and I was not able to keep a track of all the softwares that were there, and I was not able to build a system where I can use all those softwares. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to do that. Once I had a ready-made system, I started making it available for others. The key was I was curing my own itch. I was not worried about giving something to others. I was doing what I wanted to do, and that became something that others started using. Code Vigilant started because I was finding it difficult to do code review in my work life. I wanted to learn code reviews. Another person, Prajal Kulkarni, met at Null Bangalore, and I was like, yeah, I'm frustrated with this. I want to learn this. And he's like, yeah, I wanted to learn it too. And we thought, okay, let's pick some target. So we picked WordPress as our target and we started doing code review. So we figured out what code review is. We wrote automation around it. We found bugs. We disclosed them. That's kind of how Code Vigilant originated. So the origin is because I wanted to learn code security. I wanted to learn secure coding. That's how I started with that. Now, key point for open source also, for projects also, I am not doing any of my projects for others. I'm doing it because I want to do it and others get benefit out of it. That's an additional advantage that I have.
just another question, just on the lines of CI/CD.
Yeah.
So when there is a continuous integration going on, so there is a lot of checks that is going to happen. So be it a third-party library or something that is vulnerable. So if we take the keywords of audit and pen test right here, so audit is kind of a checklist driven, and pen test is going to be a lot of manual things also in that. So if we see these two things on the part of CI/CD, can CI/CD testing be relied upon auditing like an 92, like 99%? So how do you see that? So is it possible to completely have that on an audit perspective so that any person could do that CI/CD part?
See, audit is totally different than anything that we're doing here. Audit is far bigger than just a piece of code. Audit also talks about the environment, the accesses, the conditions around it, the way data is treated, and all of it. So, audit is far bigger than than what you can do within CI/CD. Yes, there is. If you see, there is a policy as code concept that is there, which helps you in deploying certain set of policies in your code environment. So if you have a policy that I don't want MD5 in the system, you can have that coded in. If you have a policy that I don't want my container to have port 80 listening, you can have that as a policy. But that's a company level policy that you can then validate against your environment in CI/CD systems. But CI system or CI scripts on their own cannot do audit for you, cannot do 100% audit for you. The second part about pen testing. Now, pen testing is especially when you're doing black box or gray box kind of pen testing when source code is not available. It's a shot in the dark. And this is something that you have to understand. When you look at a variable, an input parameter, you are trying every single thing that is possible in the world. You're throwing the kitchen sink and you're trying to see which of those give you some favorable response. And if it gives you a favorable response, you then move forward and try to create a POC around it. So if single code gives you a favorable response, you're moving towards SQL injection type. If the word is returned, you're moving towards the XSS side of things. So you try to throw everything with an assumption that there might be a flaw, and if the flaw comes up, you move forward with it. When you are doing things CI environment, you have access to source code. Now, again, in an ideal world, you should not be required to do pen testing perspective work if you have access to source code, if you can do a proper code review in a 100% accurate manner, where you know what every code path is and what variable is going to take every single path that is possible. But that's not how development work works right now. Most of the stuff that we are pulling in, so if you look at any application that people are writing, they start with import this, import that, import this, import that. That's 80% of your code. So 80% of your code comes from the supply chain side of equation. Now, when you get supply chain as the component, the problem that comes with it is you don't know what is inside it. You don't want to spend time understanding what is inside it. That's why you're using the component. Otherwise, you might have written this stuff on your own. So now you have unknown elements. That's where pen testing becomes more important, because even if you do source code analysis, your code might not actually have that path, but the dependency that you've pulled in might have that vulnerable path in it. So pen testing at the end of it is a requirement. You can't take that away right now.
Understood. Since we talked a lot about CI/CD pipelines, and since we are focusing to give this out to the community who are trying to explore new fields, right? So, if a person who wants to learn CI/CD pipeline, which of the resources would you recommend to look upon? What is the best way to get into learning CI/CD security?
Okay. I would suggest them to start with not security, but with dev work. So the first thing is, if you're a student, first and foremost, go to GitHub Student Pack, register there. You get a whole bunch of resources that you can use. Search for Free for Devs. I think that's the name of a website, and there are a bunch of GitHub links also, which list out n number of resources that are free for developers or free for students. If you have a student ID card, good. If you have a email address from your school, that's even better. Large number of organizations would offer you discount on softwares or would give you free licenses if you have student license. If you have the capability, prove that you're a student. Use these resources to start building things. Now, what do you build to get started? To get started, don't worry about anything else. Make your own website. A website which lists what do you do, who you are, what are the things that you've done so far, your resume. It can talk any random stuff. It can talk about all the animations that you've watched. It can talk about all the movies that you've watched. It does not matter. What matters is you have built a website. Now, where do you put it? Put it on something like GitHub, Codeberg, GitLab, any of these code repositories. All of them now offer a facility called pages kind of facilities, where the repository can be hosted as a website also. So you can have a proper website running there. To deploy that website, don't rely on the standard feature that they have provided. Write your own GitHub action or equivalent in whatever environment you are in. So you start understanding how these pieces fit in the puzzle. Once you've done that, now any environment that you look at, you can piece together bits and pieces of that environment by comparing it with what you built. Now you're not going with hypothetical assumptions. When I say build environment, now the thought would not be that there is some random environment. When I say build environment, now it will be, my code repository and that GitHub action that I built, that was my built environment there. So now you have correlation. Once you have that correlation, then you start looking at doing more things with the system. What else can be done? Like for example, GitHub Actions give you 2000 minutes of compute per month on a free account. So if you divide that 2000 minutes by say 30 days, you have 66 minutes. That's equivalent to 1 hour of compute power per day freely available to anyone who has a GitHub ID. What can you do with it? When you start with that question, like, I want to know what is going on in any random thing. Like for example, Pact Publication publishes one book as free book every day. So of their entire catalog, they make one book available for free every day. Now, when I was following that, I had a small cron job running on my laptop, which would give me an alert on every day. Today, this is the free book available. Can you do that thing via GitHub Action? Can you make it run on a certain date at a certain time frame and perform certain actions? Use it like a glorified cron job for all that matters. Leverage the resources that are available to you. Solve problems that you're facing. Don't worry about solving the problem of the world. Once you have solved your own problems, your problem could be as simple as, I want to figure out how to get the date of birth of someone or whosoever has the birthday today on a list somewhere. How do I solve that problem? Whatever problem you're facing, try and solve them. Once you're able to solve those problems, once you're able to automate the systems using GitHub Actions, you now have a clarity on what can be done with those actions. Once you have that, then it's easier to move forward. So instead of telling you to leverage, say, the vulnerable environment and then play around with it, I would not suggest that, because effectively when you do that, you're doing it inverse. You're basically exploring a system in a black box manner and then trying to piece things together. So the analogy that I can give is, if you've seen an elephant with your naked eyes, you know how an elephant looks like. But if I put a blindfold on you and then leave you around elephant, depending on which section of elephant you're looking at, you may have a different perception of what elephant is. And that's where understanding the system first makes more difference. Once you have that, then you can take any simple piece out of it and rip that apart.
So, moving forward with an question which is related to conferences. So, I did saw you were an advisory in Black Hat forum. So, when it comes to conferences, a lot of people talk about call for papers, the research papers that is going to be presented out there. So, we do know that like these conferences have different themes and different set of expectations that the researcher should meet to get it like qualified for the conference. So what happens behind the scenes? What are the things, how do the panelists evaluate and paper? So what are the things that you usually notice people missing out? So any key points on that part?
All right, so bunch of people have written about this. I'm probably going to paraphrase whatever they've said, but before going in that direction, there is one important criteria that people need to understand. One, if you feel like you're doing something good, doing something interesting, it's important to apply for conferences or apply to put that knowledge out. That putting the knowledge out could be via conferences, could be via white papers, could be via blog posts, whatever works for you. So you try and ensure that the knowledge is out. Now, the second aspect that comes is that what is that knowledge? Now, there are sort of blocks in which I put the knowledge in. For me, when the first time I ever talked about LLM or I looked at LLM models, it was a fascinating subject for me. I studied it with reverence. I looked at references. I learned a lot about all things on the internet. Now, I want to talk about it. Where do I go? What do I do? The ideal approach for stuff that you've learned from others around you is to do a blog post. The second ideal approach is, if there is a local group, you go there and talk. You can do both of them also. You can go to a local group and talk about it. That gives you the effectively, everyone else knows that you know the subject now because you have worked on it now, and you may end up getting questions. You may get up ending with, say, suggestions around what more you can learn on. Or let's say for LLMs, if you've not talked about RAG, or if you've not talked about reinforced learning, or if you've not talked about, say, MCPs, the person might ask questions and that may give you a pointer, hey, I need to go back and look at these things more. So that's step one, first bucket. The second bucket comes where you were doing something and something didn't work as expected. So you start digging into it. This could be the start of your research work. Like, for example, very recently that XZ bug came out where someone was trying to plant a backdoor in the system. The whole thing started because one person found it amusing that the SSH connections were getting connected with a delay. So they started exploring what is going on. Went for a while, and then someone figured out what the problem was. And then the bug came out. I remember back in, I think, 2012, PHP bug came out where effectively if you pass on -s to the PHP CGI, instead of executing the code, it would print out the page, the actual PHP page to you, which effectively meant any secrets, any usernames, any passwords in the PHP code were then visible to people. Now, the whole reason that bug came into picture was because someone ran an, I think it was Nikto or a similar tool, and the tool was responding with a delay. So they started investigating, okay, what's wrong? They started Wireshark and then saw a bunch of different responses, and then they were like, oh, this looks interesting, let's dig in. This is what we found. So curiosity. And curiosity resulting in a positive outcome. Curiosity can result in a negative outcome also. You spend the whole day and then you realize it was totally a mistake at your end, or something very simple changed somewhere. One example, Vagrant. Vagrant is a software that is used to provision VMs in your environment. For provisioning stuff inside the VM. So Vagrant does the create VM, allocate this much hard disk, allocate this much RAM, this display, all that piece. Deploy things inside it, install a particular software. You can use Chef, Puppet, or Ansible. So in one of our projects, we were using Ansible. In one of our class, everything that was working till yesterday, like before 12, stopped working after 12. Now, we spent a whole day trying to figure out what went wrong. After about 12 hours or 18 hours, we ended up realizing a sequence of events. At 12, there was a cron job on my system which would update my softwares. So Ansible got updated. Now, when Ansible updated, the new version had a breaking change. And the breaking change was that they moved a variable's default value from yes to no. Now, it was all there, but it was a mistake on our part. We didn't realize that, hey, we're going for a training, all those cron jobs should stop. So now I have that whole practice, like before going for a training, 2 days before, everything stops. My system is what the system is, and it'll remain as is. So you learn from these things. Now, these could be a good blog post, maybe a good local talk, but nothing more than that. Whereas stuff that you found where a bug was discovered, where a misconfiguration that is leading to compromises are discovered, this then becomes a point where you start looking at, okay, where can I put this out? Now, this, depending on the severity of the situation, depending on the complication of the situation, could become a bigger conference material, could become a smaller conference material. Let's say the software that you explored is only available in India. No one outside India uses that software. If I take that presentation, submit it to, say, Black Hat USA, or submit it to, say, DEF CON, or say B-Sides San Francisco, whatnot, They may accept it, but it's not of use for me because my target audience who need to know about this are all sitting in India. So I should be picking a conference relevant to it. Now I'll take two conferences within India, let's say. There's NullCon and there's CoCon. NullCon generally talks about, they have a dedicated tag called Jugaad. And they have, they're focused more on the complicated, highly technical aspects in information security domain. CoCon, on the other hand, has that level also. But they're also an organization which has a police, say Kerala police co-sponsoring the conference. So anything around policies, procedures also has a place in CoCon. So stuff which may not get accepted in NullCon might get accepted in CoCon. Similarly, something which CoCon might not accept might be very well in the wheelhouse of NullCon. So when you're trying to look for locations to submit, look at their CFP form. They generally list out stuff that you want, that they want to accept. For example, one of my trainings, which is an attack and defense training, I recently submitted it to a conference and they flat out within 5 days rejected it. It's a training that runs at like big conferences. I asked, hey, what went wrong? And they're like, Anant, we are honored and happy that you have submitted to us. All that is fine. We don't deal in this subject. So we will not accept this. So conferences have their own way of dealing with these things. So they have a clear focus area, what they want to focus on. My training was not fitting in that. So they rejected it and that's fine. So when you're submitting, you look at these CFPs to understand where you fit in. Now comes the part, what happens in the review discussions. I can't disclose all the internal details, but what I'll tell you is a very, very simple logic that you should follow. If given a choice between 500 papers and you are only required to pick 5, that's the max that you can pick. How would you evaluate whatever you are submitting compared to what everyone else might have submitted? That's kind of how the evaluations go. And a lot of times, and this applies everywhere. So I've reviewed for local conferences, I've reviewed for international conferences. A lot of times the margins are such that I am fighting to see and to figure out. At times we have ended up figuring out, hey, can't we, instead of having a 40-minute slot, can we have 20-minute slots and give both of them a space? Sometimes we've done that also. Sometimes the acceptance and rejection, so-called rejection, is of the level that the talk that was selected is 4.88 and the talk that did not made it was 4.87. So that sometimes that's the ground reality. You have a limited space. That bottles, that's the bottleneck that you face most of the time. Does not mean that if your talk got rejected, it is bad. If it is not selected, I refrain from using the word rejection because that's the most common word people use, but that does not mean it's rejected because it's not good. A lot of times when you get a message that you were not selected, the word choice is very careful that it does not say it's rejected, it says not selected, which basically means we're not saying that you're bad. We're saying that what we had at that time made more sense to us than what you provided. And it could be, and if you look at, say, the whole summer camp that we call in the USA, you have Black Hat, you have DEF CON, and you have B-Sides Las Vegas. The whole catch line with B-Sides Las Vegas was Black Hat at DEF CON became too big. Multiple talks were getting rejected. There was good material. We wanted to give them some space. So we created besides DEF CON and Black Hat a conference. That's kind of how B-Sides originated. So they were happy taking all those in and having something. So talks which may get rejected one place might actually be accepted other places. Don't worry about that. Important bit is, why are you putting this content out? Why are you doing the talk? If the idea is to put your research out, spend some time trying to figure out if a conference accepts it. Good. If it does not, do a blog post, move on. As a researcher, your idea. So I think this was Leonardo da Vinci or some painter. I don't remember who said that, but effectively a painter basically said, when asked a question, what is your favorite painting? And the answer was, the favorite painting is the one that I'm making right now. And the moment I'll change to something else, that will become my most favorite, because everything else that I've done is all done. And that's the key that a lot of people don't realize. Once you're done with your research, spend some time getting it out in the world, but then let it be. Move on to the next one, move on to the next one, and keep moving on. Otherwise, you're that one trick pony who is just focused on one research area. Hope that gives you some perspective.
It's a lot of perspective to like pick the right topic for the right conference. If I'm targeting to some specific conferences, I might filter this out based on the suggestion that you gave me. That's a lot of valuable thing. To one of the important questions that I planned for today is revolving around AI.
Okay.
So we are in the boom of AI, and we are using AI for everything, literally everything, like starting from text to music or audio or anything. We are dealing on AI. So do you see in the near future where there could be a downtrend on AI due to the lack of computation that is being available, or some of the countries' regulations where you should not use AI, or there is some restriction on how AI should be used? So, do you think there will be a downtrend in the near future for AI?
Uh, there are layers in this whole situation. One, there's a concept of too big to fail. So AI has reached kind of that point where it is too big to fail, because the investments that have come in from the top giants, they would want this technology to survive. And the way you need to understand it is, there's a saying from Halvor Flake, who's a very prominent researcher from very old time frames, that all offensive problems are technical in nature, all defensive problems are political in nature. Whatever we say, our field also has an underlying angle around politics. When there is too much money involved, there would be lobbying around ensuring that that money does not go to drains. So the regulations would be there, but the regulations would be created in such a manner that the functionalities persist. The cat's already out of the bag. There are proprietary solutions, there are open source solutions, or probably open source, because now people consider open source when the model file is out. I consider open source when the model file as well as the weights are out. And so there are a bunch of different ideas, but there are freely available resources that I as an individual can right now bring into my systems and have some work done. So AI's usage, and again, AI has two parts. There is the LLMs of the world and there is AI of the world. I'm focusing right now on the LLM piece of equation. So LLM world is not going to diminish. The AI itself has been there for a very long time. AI is artificial intelligence. Whenever there is an activity that could be done in an automated manner, considering bunch of different conditions, that's an artificial intelligence. I remember back in my initial days of learning AI, my professor made me write a code to uh, play tic-tac-toe. And effectively, one of our friends basically wrote that code by having, say, all possible positions possible and just having the whole tree there. We were trying to reduce that code down via ifs and fors and conditions and whatnot. And this guy had the whole, every single permutation combination in the code. Like, okay, if this happens with this kind of arrangement, it goes to this particular case, and this is the action that you have to take. So both of them were AI. And that was the learning that we got from our professor. He was like, both of them are AI. They're doing artificial intelligence. It does not matter what's the level of intelligence. It could be 0.1, it could be 200, but there is intelligence in that system. Now, similar manner, intelligence systems, AI systems have been there in the world. There are systems that does autonomous things for us even now, and there have been a lot. There's a very good paper that has come out. I think I'll have to get that name to you. But the paper is titled on the lines of AI as normal technology. what is happening right now is everyone is talking about AI is a prominent technology. What will happen in future, in my opinion, which I kind of agree with what that paper has said, is that AI would go in the background. It'll be there, but it's not the talk of the town. Because if you actually look at what people are trying to do right now, there's a new piece of code that they have, or there's new sort of automation that they have, which can speed up things. So they're trying to fit it into every single place and see if things get automated faster, if things start working faster. So if everyone is frustrated with code reviews, they're like, okay, take this, put it into that system, let's see if it gets faster. If it does, it's good. If it not, take it out, take it into something else. And that's what people are right now doing. The whole experimentation phase that is going on right now is trying to see where LLM models are actually going to fit and be better. The use cases would be found wherever the use cases are, and those use cases would stick around.
Got it.
So one funny use case that I have, and I've been using it for a while now, the LLM systems allow me to do boilerplate stuff. So in past, I have stuck with certain situations saying, hey, I can't be bothered to learn the basics around this, so I'm not going to go in the details of it. But now I can give a prompt to someone and ask them to do something for me. They'll give something which will probably not be 100% ready, but be good enough for me to get into that intermediary stage, or maybe a high, a bit of the advance on the beginner level side of equation. Now, when I'll try to add that remaining 20%, I'll face the challenges. And that's when I can make a decision called, do I want to spend time dealing with these challenges or not? For example, songs. I am not a singer. I am not good at acting. I'm not good in any of those arts form. But I was like, okay, how difficult writing a song could be. So I used an LLM, gave it a bunch of prompts, it gave me a song. I'm like, okay, I want to change this one word. Now, changing that one word requires me to conform to the lyrics, and then that requires change in two other places, and that changes the whole meaning of that song. Now I'm in the thick of it. Now I'm realizing what I meant when I said lyrics are not that hard, they are hard. And now I can make a call whether I want to actually spend time on it or let it be and find someone else who can do this job better and let them do that job.
Understood. Like that's a lot of different perspectives. So, as a closing question, I would like to ask about this. So, if you had to do an research for next 12 months, so what is the topic that you would pick and research upon?
Right now, I am looking at a bunch of different topics. There is an angle around mobile security, and especially the focus around what can be done to make life easier for people who are not using Android for Android. They're using Android because that's the only option they have left to use as a phone, a cheap device that they can use to communicate with others. How can I make them secure? That's one question. There's a supply chain security angle. Within supply chain security, there are lots of stuff that is going on around how people are using the code and the LLMs and the modularity and all of that. There's one very interesting question that I'm trying to explore. I've done a bunch of talks around that also. There's a term called SBOM, software bill of material. The current focus around SBOM is that it's a way and mean to identify vulnerable packages that are dependency of mines. My whole core idea around that is, till information security domain is going to try and keep SBOM as their stuff, SBOM is not going to fly. The moment we change the narrative and make SBOM usable for developers, find use cases where SBOM as an inventory or an inventory of your components is useful for developers, is the point when SBOM would become more useful and byproduct security would get improved. So that's the supply chain side of equation. Within the AI world, I think right now I'm probably trying to explore if I can make my workflows better with it. There are lots of stuff that I do in my workflows that I would, although I have a lot of automation in place, I would like to do a bit more automation, but at the same time, I'm frustrated because let's say the summarization aspect. One of the very common usage of LLM systems that people have is they dump in an article or a link or a book and ask it for summarization. and then they assume that what they have read as summary is what is the summary actually, and that's not true. And this is the same which is there for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. There used to be a software called Blinkist, I think, and there are other softwares which provide you summaries of books. Neither they have been good at that time, nor the AI summaries have been good anywhere now, because AI is trying to pick whatever is the prominent words and make a sentence out of it. And that's not the summary that I would gain while reading the book. So when you read a book, every single individual has a different set of summary of that book. The same book might be the most useful book for you. It might be the worst book for me. And the same book might have a sentence that you liked and the same sentence I might have hated. So the learnings are our learnings, and that's where the LLM piece is a problematic question. But like I said, supply chain is one area I'm working on. Mobile is another area. There are a bunch of things around cloud that I'm looking at. In terms of what is the research that people should pick, I have one simple example. And that simple example is James Kettle. He's a very renowned researcher. And this is something that I say a lot of times. James Kettle has started looking at HTTP packet. And they're going line by line. They're at the top right now, the headers. They've not even gone to the body part right now. They're just dealing with the headers and the upper intricacies that are there. What if I change one value from here to here? What if I change one value from here to here? And they're finding bugs from ages. Every year they come up with like, oh, I played with this another line and now I found these set of bugs. This year again, they're back at Blackhead with another set of bugs that they have. Look at things where people have already looked at, but give it time. Spend efforts in trying to understand what the system is. Like for understanding HTTP protocol, a friend of mine on LinkedIn suggested a few days back, and I remembered this is kind of how I learned HTTP protocol. Two of us, during our first company training days, we were learning Java. So we're like, okay, how do I learn Java? Because all they're teaching us is these are the syntaxes. I don't want to do that. I want to do some coding. So I was like, okay, I want to build something. So this other person says, hey, I'm good at UI. I want to build a web browser. Like, okay, you build a web browser. I'll build a web server. So both of us started working. He built a very minimal web browser. I built a very minimal web server. And by doing that, we had to like go through line by line every single thing that was there in the RFC. Because that was all there was. That's how the protocol is defined. But once I knew that, even though I cannot say that I'm 100% proficient in HTTP protocol, but I can understand protocol much better than other people comparatively in my circle because of that. That has given me a leg up. So that's what I suggest to people. Take the summarization part aside, start doing the actual work.
It's a great answer, by the way. And thank you so much for accepting the invite. It was great having you here, and you added a lot of value to the podcast. I think it will be very helpful for the listeners. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for inviting. Have a nice day.